For several hours, royal watchers believed Prince William had delivered a message about the future of the crown. The language surrounding it was urgent, the timing unexpected, and the word, devastating, traveled rapidly. Yet the real significance of the announcement was not what many imagined. It was what the Prince of Wales chose to interrupt his silence to address. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, had not announced an abdication, a separation, or a private rupture inside the House of Windsor. The confirmed message, released through the official account of the Prince and Princess of Wales on July 27th, concerned the destructive wildfires affecting communities in France, Spain, and the United Kingdom. William expressed sympathy for those caught in the disaster and gratitude toward firefighters, emergency personnel, and volunteers working in extremely difficult conditions. That distinction matters, because a far more sensational story had already begun circulating around the royal conversation, one filled with secret documents, hidden confrontations, dramatic family betrayals, and claims of an institution collapsing from within. Those details may create powerful drama, but they have not been publicly confirmed by Buckingham Palace or Kensington Palace. The competing version of events shows how quickly a sober royal statement can become the foundation for an entirely different narrative. And yet, removing the unsupported claims does not make William's intervention unimportant. In some ways, it makes the moment more revealing. The Prince of Wales was reportedly in the middle of the family summer break when he chose to speak, stepping briefly back into public view because the scale of the fires had become impossible to ignore. The message was concise, but its timing carried its own symbolism. The future king was presenting himself not merely as a ceremonial figure, but as a royal prepared to respond when events crossed borders and unsettled ordinary lives. For an older generation of royal viewers, that role may feel familiar. The monarchy has always attempted to offer continuity during moments of national anxiety, even when it possesses no political power to solve the crisis itself. A royal message cannot extinguish a fire, rebuild a home, or remove the fear of evacuation. What it can do is acknowledge suffering, thank those carrying the burden, and remind the public that the institution is paying attention. But William's words also carried a more modern implication. His environmental commitment is no longer a minor interest placed beside traditional royal duties. Through the Earthshot Prize and years of public advocacy, climate and conservation have become central to the identity he is building as heir. That means every message connected to environmental disaster is heard on two levels. First, as an expression of sympathy, and second, as a glimpse of the priorities he may bring more forcefully to the monarchy in the future. This is where the announcement begins to touch a deeper royal tension. A monarch must remain above party politics, but a future king also faces growing pressure to speak meaningfully about the dangers shaping the lives of younger generations. If William says too little, critics may accuse the royal family of being distant and protective from reality. If he says too much, others may question whether he is moving beyond the constitutional restraint expected of a crown. The challenge is not simply finding the right cause. It is finding a language that sounds urgent without sounding political, compassionate without appearing performative, and modern without abandoning tradition. Was this message, therefore, only an expression of concern, or was it another small sign of how William intends to use the platform he will one day inherit? The answer may lie in the contrast between Prince William and King Charles III. The king spent decades warning about environmental damage before such concerns became widely accepted within mainstream public life. William has inherited that legacy, but he is presenting it through a different style, less philosophical, more focused on practical solutions, public partnerships, and visible results. The bond between father and son is therefore not merely personal in this story. It represents two generations attempting to carry the same cause through very different stages of royal life. There is also Catherine, Princess of Wales, whose public presence has increasingly been associated with stability, family, early childhood, and a quieter form of emotional connection. Although the wildfire message centered on William's intervention, it appeared through the couple's shared public platform, where their identities as parents and senior royals often overlap. That matters because the Wales household is now required to represent several things at once: a young family deserving privacy, a future king and queen preparing for greater responsibility, and a public institution expected to respond whenever the country feels uncertain. The real turmoil, then, is not a confirmed palace rebellion. It is the pressure created when private family life, public duty, environmental crisis, constitutional restraint, and the future of the monarchy all meet in the same moment. William's announcement was devastating because the event behind it was devastating. But the royal significance came from something quieter, the growing expectation that he must already speak with the moral seriousness of a king, while still serving as the son and heir of one. And once that expectation is understood, another question begins to emerge. How far is Prince William prepared to reshape the monarchy's voice, and what happens when his vision of duty no longer fits comfortably within the old royal rules? Because the message about the fires may have lasted only a few lines, but the role it revealed is far larger, and in the next part of the story, that role begins to affect not only William, but the future shape of the royal family itself. That question reaches beyond one public message, because the modern monarchy is shaped not only by what a future king believes, but by timing, visibility, public trust, and the delicate relationship between an heir preparing to lead and a reigning monarch who still carries the authority of the crown. William may represent the next chapter, but he is not yet free to write it entirely in his own hand. For generations, the heir's position has demanded disciplined patience. He must be visible enough to reassure the public, active enough to prove his readiness, and restrained enough never to appear as though he is competing with the sovereign. That balance becomes especially sensitive when the country begins looking to the heir for a different understanding of royal duty. This is where the contrast between father and son becomes institutionally important. Charles spent much of his life developing causes before becoming king. William inherited the lesson that a royal platform can influence public conversation, but he also witnessed the criticism his father received whenever advocacy appeared to move too close to politics. The future king is attempting something more controlled, choosing issues with broad sympathy, speaking in measured language, and presenting action as service rather than intervention. At first, that may sound like communication. In reality, it is a question of power. The royal family does not operate through speeches alone. Behind every appearance sits a network of private offices, advisors, schedules, charities, government liaison, and competing demands on limited time. Buckingham Palace represents the sovereign. Kensington Palace manages the public work of the Prince and Princess of Wales. Their responsibilities often support one another, but their priorities are not always identical, reflecting two royal centers preparing for different stages of the same institution. Yet observers inevitably watch for signs of separation. When William chooses a particular issue, is he reinforcing the king's agenda or defining his own? When his household adopts a more direct style, is that modernization or a sign that the monarchy under his leadership may look noticeably different? The palace rarely answers questions framed in those terms, because to acknowledge a transition too openly could make the present reign appear temporary before its time. That silence creates space for interpretation. Some royal commentators view William's approach as a continuation of his father's work. Others believe the Prince of Wales is narrowing the monarchy's focus, favoring fewer causes, clearer outcomes, and a public image built around practical impact. Neither interpretation requires a family feud, but both point toward choices that may eventually affect patronages, staffing, and the way senior royals divide responsibility. And that is where Catherine's position becomes increasingly significant. Her influence is not constitutional, yet her public role strengthens the Wales household. She provides emotional continuity, family symbolism, and a calmer counterweight to the pressure surrounding the heir. Her work on early childhood has also allowed the couple to present a long-term social vision outside political argument. Together, William and Catherine are shaping an identity for the future court. But that identity carries risk. The more clearly the public can imagine the next reign, the more closely every difference in style will be examined. A warmer family image may be compared with the formality of the current court. A sharper focus on selected causes may be interpreted as criticism of older methods. Even scheduling choices can become evidence of rivalry for those already convinced that tension exists behind palace doors. Was the royal family truly in turmoil, or was the public witnessing the quieter strain that accompanies every transfer of influence between generations? The answer is complicated by the monarchy's reduced working membership. With fewer senior royals carrying public duties, each absence attracts more attention. Every appearance carries greater weight, and the responsibilities placed upon the Wales family become harder to separate from their private lives. William is expected to support the king, prepare for the throne, protect his children, sustain major charitable work, and remain emotionally accessible to a public that often demands reassurance before the palace is ready to provide it. That pressure does not prove conflict, but it creates conditions in which conflict would become more consequential. A disagreement over timing, tone, or priorities could affect how the monarchy responds to crisis and whether the institution appears united. There is also another figure whose absence continues to shape this conversation: Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. His departure from royal duties changed the family's working structure and showed how personal relationships can become institutional problems when they unfold in public. William now prepares for kingship without the brother once expected to stand beside him. That loss has altered the distribution of duty and intensified the focus on the heir's immediate family. The unresolved relationship between the brothers affects how audiences interpret each development. A statement about duty can be heard as a response to Harry. A decision about privacy can be connected to past criticism. A difference in public strategy can be presented as proof of a deeper divide, even when no direct link has been established. Old wounds continue to influence the meaning of new events. For William, this creates a leadership test before the crown is his. Can he establish a distinct role without seeming impatient? Can he protect his household without appearing withdrawn? Can he respond to modern crises while preserving the political neutrality on which the monarchy depends? And can he prepare the institution for change without reopening family fractures that have already damaged public trust? Those questions cannot be answered through one announcement, but they explain why a brief intervention can feel larger than the words themselves. The future king is no longer judged only on what he says. He is judged on what each decision appears to reveal about the reign still to come. And behind that growing expectation, another issue was beginning to emerge, one involving not simply William's public voice, but the people, loyalties, and unresolved relationships that could determine whether his vision ever becomes reality. Those loyalties are not arranged in simple lines, because the modern royal family is no longer a large machine in which every responsibility can be passed quietly from one relative to another. It is a smaller institution carrying historic expectations with fewer people, greater scrutiny, and almost no room for private disagreement to remain private. In that environment, personal trust becomes royal infrastructure. Among the figures often viewed as a stabilizing force is Princess and the Princess Royal. Her reputation has been built on consistency rather than spectacle, while her position as the king's sister gives her an authority no formal title can fully explain. She represents continuity with the late Queen's generation, yet she also understands the pressures facing the next one. There is no confirmed evidence of an internal alliance against the king, but her presence raises an important question. When the monarchy enters a period of change, whose judgment does the heir trust most? Royal transitions are shaped long before a new reign begins. They are shaped through the advisors who gain access, the relatives who can speak honestly, and the habits formed during years of preparation. A future monarch may inherit constitutional duties automatically, but he does not inherit unity, confidence, or public affection by decree. Queen Camilla occupies a different place in that balance. As the king's wife, she is central to the present court and to the sovereign's personal support. Her role is not the same as William's, yet the coexistence of a current royal household and the future one creates questions about influence, access, and priorities. Commentators may interpret differences in style as rivalry, but Buckingham Palace has not publicly confirmed any struggle between Camilla and the Wales family. Still, perception has consequences. A seating arrangement becomes a signal. An absent name becomes an insult. A delayed appearance becomes evidence of disagreement. Royal life has always been shaped as much by symbolism as by official explanation. That symbolism becomes more sensitive when Prince Harry is considered. His distance from royal life removed not only a working member of the family, but also the person who once shared William's history most intimately. The brothers grew up under the same public gaze, carried the same bereavement, and were once presented as the emotional future of the monarchy. The collapse of that public partnership created a vacancy no advisor could fully replace. Some observers believe this has made William more cautious about trust. That remains interpretation rather than confirmed fact. Yet the lesson created by years of interviews, memoirs, and competing recollections is difficult to ignore. Within a royal family, private pain can eventually become public evidence in a battle over reputation. Was the institution protecting itself by limiting access and tightening control, or was that instinct making reconciliation even harder? The contradiction is striking. A monarchy depends upon discretion, but discretion can resemble secrecy. It depends upon unity, but enforced unity can hide unresolved conflict. It depends upon family symbolism, yet the people inside that symbol remain individuals with memories and loyalties that cannot be managed like items on a schedule. William's challenge is not simply to decide whom he trusts. It is to create a structure in which trust does not collapse when disagreement appears. Catherine's importance becomes clearer within that structure. She helps shape the emotional atmosphere around the Wales household, particularly in the way the couple present family life, service, and continuity. Because she is both a senior royal and the mother of the next generation, decisions about privacy, public exposure, schooling, and ceremonial preparation carry institutional weight even when they begin as parental choices. This is where the consequences move beyond William himself. Prince George is not simply the couple's eldest child. He stands in the direct line of succession. Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis also live within a system that will define them publicly before they are old enough to define themselves. The way their parents manage that reality may become one of the clearest differences between the present monarchy and the one being prepared for the future. There is no confirmed evidence that the children are at the center of a palace dispute, but their position changes the meaning of every decision. Protecting them from excessive exposure can be understood as responsible parenting, yet the monarchy also depends upon carefully managed visibility to create familiarity and continuity. Introduce them too early, and childhood becomes performance. Hold them back too long, and questions begin to grow about readiness and the future image of the crown. That dilemma reveals the deeper shift taking place. William is not preparing only to inherit his father's office. He is deciding what kind of royal childhood, family structure, and support system will surround the reign after his own. The loyalties being formed now may determine not merely who advises the next king, but what values the next generation associates with duty itself. And even that did not explain the most sensitive part of the story, because one development was beginning to place the monarchy's future in a far more personal frame. The real question was no longer simply how William would lead. It was what he was prepared to change in order to protect the child who may one day have to follow him. Protecting George would therefore require more than limiting cameras or choosing the right public appearances. It would mean deciding which royal expectations should be preserved, which should be delayed, and which burdens should never be passed down in the same form. For William, that choice carries urgency, because his son is no longer viewed only as a child beside his parents. He is increasingly seen as the link between the monarchy of today and the crown that may exist decades from now. That shift changes the meaning of every family appearance. Away from a balcony can be interpreted as preparation. A place at a national ceremony can look like a lesson in duty. Even an ordinary moment between father and son may be examined for evidence of confidence or readiness. None of those interpretations can reveal what George privately understands, and Kensington Palace has not confirmed the details of any program preparing him for kingship. Yet the symbolism surrounding him is already becoming harder to control. The strongest turning point is therefore not a secret order or an alleged confrontation behind palace doors. It is the moment at which the monarchy's future becomes visible in the face of a young person who never chose the position waiting for him. William understands that contradiction in a way few parents could. His own childhood unfolded beneath intense public attention, and the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, permanently shaped the way the world viewed both brothers. It would be speculation to claim that one experience determines every decision he now makes as a father. But his public emphasis on mental health and family stability suggests that emotional preparation matters to his understanding of duty, not merely ceremonial training. That approach could quietly alter royal tradition. Earlier generations were often expected to adapt themselves to the institution. William and Catherine appear determined to make the institution leave greater room for the individual. A future sovereign raised to understand emotional well-being, environmental responsibility, and public pressure could bring a less distant tone to the crown, but also face greater demands for personal authenticity. And this is where the wildfire message returns with greater force. The Prince of Wales officially supports the king while carrying out public duties, and environmental protection remains one of his stated priorities. His Earthshot work centers on practical solutions, while Charles has spent decades connecting royal influence with sustainability. Their shared focus demonstrates continuity, not confirmed rivalry. In October 2025, the king and his heir appeared together at an event linked to the countdown to COP30, publicly presenting climate action as a cause connecting the present reign with the next. But continuity creates pressure of its own. When a cause belongs so strongly to both men, the public begins comparing not only their commitment, but their methods. Charles built his reputation through long advocacy. William increasingly emphasizes scale, measurable impact, and partnerships capable of producing visible change. One carries a warning from the past, the other seeks to demonstrate solutions for the future. Where, then, does George enter that story? Not as a campaigner, and certainly not as a political voice. He remains a child and should be understood as one. Symbolically, however, the language surrounding climate, responsibility, and future generations points toward him. When William speaks about protecting the natural world for those who will inherit it, the idea is not abstract. His children belong to that generation, while George may one day inherit both the institution and the consequences of decisions made long before his reign. That is why the announcement carried more meaning than a brief expression of sympathy. It placed William in the position of responding to immediate suffering while representing a crown that must think in generations. The fires belong to the present, but the royal question beneath them concerned inheritance. What kind of country, institution, and moral authority will be handed forward when the next heir steps into public duty? The strategic danger is now clearer. If William protects his children so completely that the public rarely sees their relationship with duty, the monarchy may struggle to build familiarity with its future. If he increases their visibility too quickly, the institution risks turning adolescence into preparation theater. Either choice can be criticized, and each decision will be judged not only as parenting but as succession planning. Catherine's role becomes decisive at this stage, not because there is evidence of a private battle, but because the future court is being formed through family choices as much as official policy. The values established inside the Wales household will influence how its members respond to attention, criticism, and obligation. The emotional culture surrounding a future king may become one of William and Catherine's most consequential legacies. The implications also reach Charles. Every successful step William takes can strengthen the monarchy the king is trying to preserve, yet it can also remind the public that another reign is waiting. Charles must give his heirs space to prepare without allowing the institution to appear divided. William must develop authority without seeming to reign before the crown is his. The official record continues to show him carrying out duties in support of the monarch, but public perception is rarely governed by constitutional wording alone. The devastating element of William's announcement was therefore never proof that the family had collapsed. It was the reminder that the world confronting the next generation may be harsher, less predictable, and less patient with ceremonial silence. William can prepare George for constitutional responsibility, but he cannot shield him from the question already facing the monarchy. What purpose should a future king serve in an age demanding visible relevance? And even then, one question remains unanswered, the question that gives the entire story its final meaning. Is William carefully protecting the monarchy he expects George to inherit, or is he preparing his son to transform it so profoundly that the crown may never sound, look, or lead in quite the same way again? The answer may not lie at either extreme. William is unlikely to preserve every inherited custom unchanged, but neither is he preparing to discard the institution that has defined his life. What appears to be taking shape is a more selective monarchy, one that protects ceremony where it creates continuity, questions tradition where it creates unnecessary harm, and measures royal duty by whether it still carries meaning beyond palace walls. That distinction is crucial. The future of the crown will not be decided by one dramatic declaration or a single moment of public attention. It will be shaped through hundreds of quieter choices, which causes receive royal focus, how quickly the younger generation enters public life, what kind of advisors surround the heir, and whether the monarchy responds to national anxiety with genuine understanding or carefully managed distance. William's message about the fires offered a small but revealing example of that approach. He did not attempt to dominate the crisis or place the royal family at its center. Instead, the intervention acknowledged those experiencing loss and recognized the people confronting danger directly. That style suggests a future monarchy less concerned with appearing powerful and more concerned with demonstrating attentiveness. For some, that may seem like a modest adjustment. Historically, however, the monarchy's survival has often depended on knowing when modest adjustments are no longer enough. Each generation inherits a version of the crown shaped by the fears and expectations of the one before it. Queen Elizabeth II represented stability through extraordinary social change. Charles brought decades of advocacy into the sovereign's role while accepting the tighter limits placed upon a reigning monarch. William now faces a different test, maintaining continuity in an age when public trust must be earned repeatedly rather than assumed. That makes the word legacy more complicated than it first appears. A royal legacy is not only what a monarch builds, it is also what an heir chooses not to continue. William has seen the consequences of uncontrolled media attention, public family conflict, and an institution struggling to explain itself during moments of uncertainty. Those experiences do not automatically reveal his private intentions, and it would be wrong to claim that every future decision can already be predicted. Yet they form part of the environment in which his understanding of leadership has developed. For George, the consequences may be profound. He could inherit a crown that remains rich in ceremony but is more cautious about exposing the private lives of those who serve it. He may be introduced to duty gradually, with greater attention given to emotional readiness and personal identity. He may also be expected to understand that royal status alone will not guarantee public respect. This would represent a significant change in the monarchy's relationship with succession. Traditionally, preparation for the throne centered upon constitutional knowledge, history, service, and discipline. Those elements will remain essential, but a future sovereign may also require skills once considered secondary: emotional intelligence, an understanding of digital culture, environmental awareness, and the ability to communicate with communities that no longer view deference as automatic. The institution's strength may therefore depend less on distance and more on credibility. But credibility carries its own danger. The more human a royal figure appears, the more the public may demand access to that humanity. Expressions of vulnerability can create sympathy, but they can also invite deeper examination. Family warmth can strengthen the monarchy's image, while making moments of tension more visible. A modern crown must appear open without surrendering every boundary, and personal without becoming another form of celebrity. William and Catherine will have to navigate that contradiction not only for themselves, but for all three of their children. Their decisions will influence whether the next generation experiences royal life as a source of purpose or as an obligation from which there is no private escape. The issue is no longer simply how to train an heir. It is how to preserve the person inside the heir. That may be the most meaningful consequence of this story. The devastating reality behind William's announcement was the destruction faced by communities affected by fire, but the royal response exposed a larger principle. Leadership is judged most closely when power cannot provide an immediate solution. In those moments, presence, recognition, and moral clarity become the tools available to the crown. Whether that approach will satisfy the public remains uncertain. Some will always want the monarchy to speak more forcefully. Others will fear that any visible position threatens political neutrality. The future king will repeatedly face this narrow passage between relevance and restraint, knowing that silence can appear detached while intervention can appear unconstitutional. His success may depend upon choosing moments that connect naturally with service, national well-being, and long-term responsibility. Environmental emergencies, mental health, homelessness, and support for emergency workers offer a language through which a royal can acknowledge urgent problems without attempting to govern. Yet even those causes carry political consequences, especially when public frustration is already high. The real transformation, therefore, may not be a revolution inside the palace. It may be a gradual change in emphasis, from inherited authority to demonstrated usefulness, from automatic loyalty to public confidence, and from protecting the institution at all costs to recognizing that the institution survives only when people understand why it remains. William's greatest challenge will be ensuring that modernization does not appear to reject his father's reign. Charles's greatest challenge will be allowing the heir's identity to develop without treating every difference as a judgment on the present. Their relationship may ultimately determine whether the transition between them feels like continuity or correction, although no public statement can fully reveal how that balance is managed privately. What can be seen is an institution preparing for change while insisting that no change is imminent. That is the permanent contradiction of succession. The next reign must be imagined before it arrives, yet never allowed to overshadow the monarch who still occupies the throne. And so this story leaves the crown at a delicate threshold. William's intervention did not confirm royal turmoil, but it revealed the weight already gathering around his public voice, his family, and the future he is preparing George to inherit. Is the Prince of Wales simply adapting royal duty to a changing world, or is the House of Windsor entering a deeper transformation that will only become visible over time? While that question remains open, attention is already shifting elsewhere within the royal family. Another development is beginning to test the same fragile balance between private loyalty and public responsibility, and this time, the pressure may fall upon a royal figure whose position inside the monarchy has become far more complicated than appearances suggest.